Hello, my name is Sophia Davis, and I'm 35 years old. I own a successful jewelry store in New York City, though most people wouldn't know it's mine. I use my maiden name for the business to keep things private. My husband, Mark Davis, doesn't know either. But that's the least of my worries now. Mark and I have been married for 7 years, and things were good at first. We had a nice home, good vacations, and I thought we were happy. But for the past year, something changed. Mark became distant, working late nights and taking calls in secret. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. It all started yesterday when I was reviewing security footage for my store. Every evening, I check the cameras to ensure that everything is running smoothly. But this time, I froze when I saw him, Mark, walking into my jewelry store with another woman. She was younger, maybe in her mid-20s, with long blonde hair and a flashy smile. I watched them as they strolled through the aisles, hand in hand. My stomach twisted as Mark picked out a diamond ring, a beautiful one that was worth thousands of dollars. He used our joint bank account to pay for it, thinking I'd never find out. The worst part? He looked happy, happier than he had been with me in months. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I felt cold inside. A calm, dangerous kind of cold. I knew exactly what I had to do. After I confirmed the purchase through the store's payment records, I called the bank. Within minutes, I froze all our joint accounts and credit cards. Mark would have no access to any of the money we shared. I made sure of it. But I wasn't done yet. When I returned home that evening, Mark was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. As soon as he saw me, he jumped up. His face was red, and he looked furious. "My ATM card isn't working," he yelled. "Why did the bank freeze our accounts?" I just smiled. "Oh, you'll find out soon enough." Mark's eyes narrowed as he stood there, breathing heavily. I could tell he was trying to control his anger, but it wasn't working. His hands balled into fists, and for a second I wondered if he was going to throw something. Instead, he paced back and forth like a caged lion. "Sophia," he said, his voice dangerously low. "What did you do?" I sat down on the couch, crossing my legs calmly, as if we were about to have a casual chat about dinner. "I froze the accounts," I said, looking directly into his eyes. "All of them." His jaw dropped. "Why would you do that?" he shouted. "How am I supposed to pay for anything?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Why don't you tell me why you bought a diamond ring today, Mark? And while you're at it, tell me who the blonde woman was." The color drained from his face, and for a moment, he looked like a child caught stealing candy. What are you talking about?" he stammered, but I could see the panic creeping in. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said firmly. "I own that jewelry store, Mark. I saw the footage. You bought a ring using my money to give to your mistress." He opened his mouth to deny it, but no words came out. His shoulders slumped, and he finally sat down across from me. "It's not what you think," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. "Oh, really?" I laughed bitterly. "Then please, explain to me how this isn't betrayal." Mark rubbed his hands over his face, as if trying to wipe away the mess he'd made. "I was going to end it," he said quietly. "I swear. I was just trying to figure things out." "You figured things out by buying another woman a ring with my hard-earned money?" My voice rose, and I could feel the heat of anger flushing through me. "Do you even hear yourself?" He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with something that almost resembled guilt. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stood up, towering over him. "Mark, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. Every text, every meeting, every dollar spent, you made those choices. Don't stand here and insult my intelligence." Silence filled the room. I could hear the sound of the clock ticking, each second stretching out like an eternity. Then I delivered the final blow. "I've already contacted a lawyer," I said, watching his face closely. "I'm filing for divorce." He shot up from the couch. "Divorce?" "No, Sophia, wait. We can fix this. Don't do this." "I'm done fixing things, Mark. I've done nothing but fix your messes for years." "Not anymore." Mark wasn't giving up easily. He followed me around the house, begging, pleading, and making promises he had no intention of keeping. I'll never see her again. I'll go to therapy. We can go to counseling together. I spun around, glaring at him. You think a few promises will fix this? Do you even realize how deep you've sunk? Desperation filled his eyes. I'll give you whatever you want. Just don't leave me. You already gave me what I needed, I said, grabbing my phone. Proof of betrayal. And thanks to the prenup, you're not getting a dime of what I built. Mark's face turned pale. Prenups? That's right, I said, grinning for the first time that evening. Did you forget? Everything under my name stays with me. I grabbed my keys and headed toward the front door. But before I left, I turned back to him one last time. Oh, and by the way, I added, that diamond ring you bought? I swapped it with a fake. Good luck explaining that to your girlfriend. I walked out, slamming the door behind me. A month later, I sat in my lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers. The house, the car, and the savings were all under my control. Mark had nothing left except regret. As I stepped outside into the sunlight, I felt free for the first time in years. No more lies. No more betrayal. I was ready to rebuild my life on my terms. And if Mark thought this was the end of my revenge, he was wrong. I still had one more surprise waiting for him, an embezzlement investigation. He'd be hearing from the authorities very soon. I smiled as I walked away, ready for the next chapter of my life. It had been 2 weeks since I walked out of that house and left Mark behind. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. His betrayal went beyond emotional damage. He had stolen money from me, and I wanted justice. I wasn't just going to take everything he had. I was going to make sure he paid for what he did. I met with my lawyer, Thomas Green, a sharp, no-nonsense man in his 40s who had handled high-profile cases. We have everything we need to move forward, he said, sliding a folder across the table toward me. Inside were bank statements, receipts, and messages Mark had sent to his mistress about the money he had been siphoning from our accounts. This isn't just about the ring, Thomas said. He's been transferring large amounts into a hidden account for over a year. I clenched my fists. How much are we talking about? Over $250,000, Thomas replied. We can hit him with charges of fraud and embezzlement. I smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind you give when you know someone is about to pay for their sins. Let's do it, I said. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of messages from mutual friends. Apparently, Mark had been served with a court summons, and the news had spread fast. But that wasn't the only surprise. My phone buzzed. It was Lisa, one of my close friends. Have you seen the news? She asked, practically breathless. What news? I asked, pulling up a news app. There it was, right on the homepage. Local man accused of embezzlement faces legal action from estranged wife. The article detailed how Mark had been caught funneling money from our joint accounts into his personal projects, and how I was taking him to court to get it all back. The best part? His company had caught wind of the scandal and suspended him from his job. 2 days later, I received a call from Mark. His voice sounded desperate. Sophia, please meet me, he begged. We need to talk. I agreed to meet him, but only because I wanted to see him squirm. We met at a small cafe near his office. When he arrived, he looked terrible. His hair was messy, and the dark circles under his eyes told me he hadn't been sleeping. Good. Sophia, he started, leaning forward as if we were still friends. Please drop the charges. I'll pay you back. I'll sell whatever I need to. I sipped my coffee, acting like his words didn't matter. It's too late for that, Mark. You didn't just betray me. You stole from me. I was desperate, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't know what else to do. I raised an eyebrow. So, your solution was to cheat on me and drain our accounts? He had no response to that, and I wasn't about to let him off the hook. The only reason I'm meeting you now is to tell you that I've already won. The divorce settlement is in my favor. You're under investigation for embezzlement, and your mistress? She dumped you, didn't she? Mark looked away, confirming what I already knew. The woman he had thrown everything away for had left him the moment things got tough. Typical. 3 weeks later, I stood in court, watching as the judge reviewed the evidence. Mark sat a few feet away, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. His lawyer had tried to argue that the money transfers were for family expenses, but the paper trail showed otherwise. The judge's decision came quickly. I find the defendant guilty of embezzlement and fraud. As part of the divorce settlement, Mrs. Davis will retain full control of the joint assets, and the defendant will pay restitution. Mark's shoulders slumped, and I knew this was the moment he realized it was truly over. But there was more. Additionally, the judge continued, due to the severity of the fraud, the defendant will serve 1 year in prison and pay a $50,000 fine. I held my breath as the judge delivered the final blow. Mark looked like he was about to collapse. As I left the courtroom, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by Mark's lies and betrayal. I was free. Outside the courthouse, Thomas smiled as he shook my hand.
"You did it," he said.
"No," I replied. "We did it." I walked to my car, thinking about what came next. I had a business to grow, a new home to settle into, and a fresh start waiting for me. But first, I had one more thing to do. A week later, I sent Mark a package while he was still packing his things to move out of our house. Inside the box was the fake diamond ring he had bought for his mistress, along with a handwritten note. "Dear Mark, here's the ring you bought with my money. Don't worry, it's fake, just like your promises. Enjoy your future. I know I will. Sincerely,
Sophia."
As I sealed the box, I smiled to myself. I wasn't just moving on, I was thriving. And no matter where life took me next, one thing was certain. I had learned to protect what was mine, and no one would ever take that from